Hey everyone, Drago here. Just wanted to do a quick deck profile. Going over my deck list that I used for LCQ, which I got second in, and then I also went 5-4 in the main event. Um, Main event didn't go quite as expected, but overall, I mean, a pretty good weekend. Went 8-1 LCQ, uh, and then still went positive the second day. Figured I'd make a deck profile and also just talk about why I choose the list that I did, and a couple tips for certain matchups. Because why not? And so we'll go ahead and start off showing off the 2Ks for the deck. And so I was on a Red Hawk build, just as a preamble. Wasn't on control or like a rush build. Looking at all the lists that topped Nats itself, the main event, it looks like everyone was on a version of control, which makes sense. A little bit more consistent. I think it does better into a meta where you're not expecting Lucci as much, but I think that's probably a decent reason why the list flopped towards the end because they weren't playing Dofies or Ploofies. They probably ran into BY or Lucci. I'm not saying my meta call was good. I think I just had good matchups overall and saw well, but just an insight. So we're at 4 Sanji, 2K counter, playable versus I think the purple Luffy's, or at least purple black and purple Luffy. Draws you a card, adds a lot of pressure. Most of the time they have to swing at it because if they don't, getting two swings while drawing essentially two cards, going to 3 life is like fine. And then eventually they want to pressure, and if they don't, it's okay. And then the other matchup is really good into is Blackbeard. I didn't play any Blackbeard this weekend, but love playing it, especially on turns where I can go 5 drop into Sanji on 7, for example, and just set up the Sanji to go wide because that's the key to beating Blackbeard. Then for Otama, pretty straightforward, usually 2K, but you can combo it with Rayleigh and Beckman as you'll see later, or even with Lime Juice. Lime Juice, again, usually just a 2K, didn't come up at all in any of the 18 rounds this weekend, but it definitely has come up in testing a ton. At locals, it's come up. At case tournaments, it's come up. Making something 4K or less unable to block obviously has a ton of usefulness. And then for Hongo, this again usually just a 2K, but has a lot of merit to just being placed versus decks like Purple Luffy to be able to help remove Luffy Taro on curve like a Beckman or something. Um, but I actually didn't get to play it once. I think all the decks. I think I played a Pluffy once, didn't see it in the starting hand, and then everything else I either didn't have it to play it on 3 Dawn, or I had like a better 4 Dawn play or like a better 5 Dawn play. But those are the 16 2Ks for the deck. Um, if I was playing this version of the deck, I wouldn't make any changes, but I'll go over that more in a second. Then we get into our actual curve out. And so I'm at 2 Lucky Roo. This was mainly a call. I was expecting to see more Lucci and Plouffe. I've played 2 Lucci in LCQ and 2 Lucci in main event, but I went 2-0 in LCQ, 0-2 in main event, losing to Andy Win the second time, or in round 5. He was the second Lucci loss. The first one was to 7. Um, and Andy ended up getting 4th, so congrats to him. Didn't see Lucky Roo versus Lucci or the Plouffe I played. I think I played Lucky Roo a total of 5 times in 18 rounds. He got bounced 3 times, trashed in the mirror once, and then one other time he actually got value. Round 8 in LCQ, I was able to block and pop a Weevil before it swung. Um, we'll talk about this card later, but I was at 2 Roo. 2 Marco, pretty self-explanatory, mainly just to get something on curve, and it's a sticky body that Blackbeard or Lucci can't get rid of easily. And then 3 Ace, same reason, just even stickier. 4 Rayleigh, blocker, late game is a MVP at being really defensive and helping you live a lot of late game scenarios, and I'll explain the scenarios that helped me in later. 4 Beckman, good on curve, nice tempo play, especially going first. Removes a lot of common threats right now that are 6K or less. And it's trash, so obviously it works against Sabo, just really nice. Then we get into the top end for Rayleigh. Pretty self-explanatory. It's like the defensive top end of the deck. Um, Sometimes you don't even have to pop anything. You can just think of Rayleigh as giving yourself 5k counter because that's what he's reducing, while also popping like a small baby or a Rebecca or anything. Usually better into Plouffe and Dofi. Um, not really playable into Lucci apparently, and that's all I saw versus the Luccis in main event, but it's okay. Then for Dragon, I think Dragon is probably the best card in the deck, at least for this version of the deck. So much pressure, especially versus a deck like Lucci. And either the two Lucci losses, if I saw a double Dragon, I'd probably straight up win. But I only saw one. And I think in the mirror it breaks the mirror too. I think if you go first and if you go Dragon on 9, Dragon on your first 10 Dawn, even if they slam a Shanks on 10, that's so much pressure. And then if you're able to pressure them a lot early in the mirror, when you go to 9 and then you do a Dragon and you're like, oh, I'm already at 3 life as Shanks and like 6 cards. And now I gotta stare a 9 and a 7 and a 9, bare minimum, assuming nothing else is on board. Because if you have a Beckman on board, that's like 7, 7, 9 again. So it's really hard to deal with that pressure because Shanks, like 10 cost Shanks alone, won't save you. And then for 10 cost Shanks, the GOAT. Um, don't think it's the best card in the deck, but really good card. So many games, it'll just give you a blanket, essentially 4K. Helps you control games or help you just burst down games because you're at 4 life, like 5, 6 cards in hand sometimes. You drop this, especially if they're not a black deck, they just have to stare at this in the face and they're like, I probably just lose because it's just going to get infinite value. Then I'm at 2 Roger. Pretty self-explanatory card. It's a win condition. I think it's really important versus decks like Blackbeard. To a certain degree, it can still matter versus Lucci, and that's exactly how I used it versus Andy. In fact, like I didn't win the game, but he got me to 0, and he has 1 blocker, 2 life, 2 cards, and I have leader, an ace, a 10 cost Shanks on board, and Roger in hand. I'm like, well, I'm at 0 at least, so it gives me an out. And it's like if you have only two 1Ks or like one's a brick, I win the game. And so I play Roger, I go 5, he gives me a 2K, I go 6, he gives me a 2K, he wins. But if he didn't have that, thanks to Roger, he takes one of the 5 or 6, then he has 1 life and I have a 12K and 13K while he has at most 3 cards in hand. So pretty self-explanatory as to why Roger's good. But this is also the GOAT versus Blackbeard. And then I'm at 4 Red Hawk and 1 0 cost. Red Hawk pretty self-explanatory. I think at this point, Noel got this really popularized for good reason. I think Red Hawk does so much well for us. Um, defensively, people have to play around it when you leave 2 Dawn open in the late game. I mean, just plus 4K, even if it is for 2 Dawn, especially as a leader like Shanks, is super strong. Uh, there were at least 5 games that I won by just saying, okay, I have a big board. I can't really pressure you though, like to actually kill my opponent reliably. So I'm going to play Rayleigh, and I already have a Red Hawk in hand, so I play the Rayleigh first, and I'll be like, oh, I had double Red Hawk. I'll probably just swing 6, swing with board, and then keep double Red Hawk and block her up, and my opponent can't win. There are also a couple other times where the board will be relatively small, like they'll have 3 or 4 swings, I'm at 1 life, but I have a Rayleigh on board, and it draws me a Red Hawk, and I'm like, oh, cool. And sometimes it doesn't even have to draw a Red Hawk. Sometimes, as long as it draws me 2 2Ks or even just 2 1s. The blocker plus leader effect plus a life buffer and like 4 or 5 cards in hand, and then just being able to cycle out any bricks potentially, it just goes so crazy. But especially with how like this deck has to rely on basically top decking, Rayleigh to a certain degree is just expanding that pool. And so there are a lot of times where I'd be like, all right, well, my win condition is play Rayleigh, draw Red Hawk. If I draw it, I literally cannot lose. If not, then okay, there's outs. Either Red Hawk's in life, or life may have to be a 2K, or my opponent does weird math because I still left 2 Dawn up. But when it draws me Red Hawk specifically, there are a lot of times it's like, yeah, I haven't seen a Red Hawk all game. We're 7, 8, 9, 10 turns in, so I've seen like 15 of my deck's cards. There's a decent chance it's in the next top 2. And if it is, I auto win. And if not, okay. If it draws me any sort of counter, that also does good. Um, so yeah, that was the list. I posted my matchups before. I'll probably post it in the description or in the comments and pin it. Um, the only changes I would make to this version of Shanks, because this is not a control list. I'm gonna test the control list, especially because locals are all mirror and floofy anyways, and I think the control list does better into that. The only change I would make to this list, which I think is more suited for a Blackbeard, Dofi, BY meta, is potentially cutting Lucky Roo to go to fourth ace and probably a second zero cost, but it could be a third Marco. It could be anything, honestly. It can be a 17th 2K. I'm sure you can find one. It could be a Rush Zoro and just have it as a one of. Rue underperformed really hard. In testing, it did pretty good. And then since we are seeing the rise of Lucci, if a Black Yellow Luffy doesn't see Sabo, the power up Luffy then just dies to it as well. So like I think there's a world where Lucky Roo works. In all the topping lists, he's run at least 3, but again those are more control builds. They're running Uta Searcher, so he's more consistent to find as well. Um, but for my list, he just didn't come up, and that's okay. But I would probably make a change there. Um, Overall, why did I play Shanks? Basically, because I said I was gonna play Shanks, or I wanted a Shanks leader since 01. So if my friends saw me switch, they would have killed me. And I rather lose with Shanks than get all that shit from them for not playing him. So that's why I ended up playing him, at least at LCQ. I considered swapping for day 2. I had Dofi and Ploofy on me, um, but I got lazy and I was like, oh, I'll just play Shanks again. Don't necessarily regret it, but playing 2 Lucci is tough. I think if I played like another Dofi round 4, the chances that I played another, even though there was a good amount of Lucci in that at the main event, I think if I dodged Lucci one more time and started off 4-0, I probably wouldn't have run into another one. And then knowing what was at the top tables, there was a couple Blackbeards, a lot of Dofi, a couple BYs. I would have really liked my spread into that better than Lucci or the Mirror. Uh, but yeah, overall it was a good weekend. Um, Certain things like I think a lot of people don't realize their defensive outs with Rayleigh sometimes. People underestimate a 5 cost blocker is like relatively hard to get rid of. Like Dofi can't do it unless they have Jozu or like a Gravity Blade. Lucci gets rid of it easily, but that's a given. BY can't get rid of it easily. Purple Luffy can if they have the cards, and if not, just or also just forcing them to either play a Sanji or to play a Usohachi makes their swings less efficient. So if you did draw a Red Hawk, even if they use that Dawn, like you just got them to use 3 Dawn, that isn't going towards swinging while you have Red Hawk and potentially a life up or a lot of cards in hand. If anyone has any questions, I'll try to answer them in the comments. But yeah, just wanted to get a quick profile just to show off the deck. It was a pretty good weekend overall. Shout out to my carpool. We ended up driving from Austin all the way to Orlando. It was like 18 hours there each way. My friend Chicky, he got 53rd with Purple Black Luffy, and a lot of us got top 256 extra prizing, I guess. So that was cool. And yeah, guys, thanks for watching. I'll have more VODs going up, as the 09 meta progresses. We have One Piece Day in March, which I believe is still 09. We have all the treasure cups. You may not see Shanks as much for the next week or two while I finally try and test other decks. I have Bonnie in the works. I'm gonna play Buggy once or twice for reasons. Still want to test stuff like Control Shanks. Still want to test Ploofy a little bit more. And so, yeah. Thanks for watching, and thanks for all the congratulations, and I'll see y'all later.